Live stream now. This meeting is being live streamed. Got it. Live streamed to the masses, the masses that are out there.
Now that was less painful than your previous two presentations. I watched Julian's and Howard's.
Oh, yeah.
You had a bit of setup trouble.
Well, with Howard, we started at the beginning. It was our first one of the series, and so we just wanted to make sure it was doing what we thought it was doing. And with Julian, he just doesn't know how to do screen shares. So
no, yeah.
That's the way it goes. You can't expect much of someone like him who actively pushes away technology. He's like, no, I'm not going to do it.
Very much a traditional new church minister.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure Julian was joking, but as they say, many a truth is spoken in jest. Julian said, "I'm starting to feel like it's time for me to go."
Yeah,
because things are happening so fast. And I have to say, reading the last couple of weeks about the AI writing apps that can generate content.
Chat GPT, that's just exploded. It's crazy. Yeah.
I'll use an example. I've never had a problem distinguishing a spam email or text. Never had a problem. Some people, I still don't understand how some people don't, but I've never had a problem. I've never clicked. I've never opened anything. It's just, to me, it's very obvious that at least this is a human who doesn't speak my language, or B, it's not even a human. But with that chat GPT or GPS or whatever, I'm like, I think I'm out of here. I think I'm done. The world of technology has moved past my ability to comprehend it. Now, don't call social services and say I think Howard's going to off himself, but
that wasn't where I was going to go. But
okay.
The interesting thing is, I was actually listening to a podcast last week about this kind of stuff, and it seems that though the AIs can do, an article or a summary or something like that, what we're seeing is that they still can't carry a conversation. And there's been a lot of attempts at that, and they're describing how this one AI made years ago. Oh, my computer's freaking out here.
You're fine to us.
That's weird because my screen has all gone.
Oh, okay. We're not having any trouble seeing you or hearing you.
That's what happens when you start talking about the AI.
I know. Let's see if this helps. I'm just gonna reconnect. It's like a fire, so it's all sorts of blurry.
My screen just started to look a lot better because my wife moved into the room.
Nice.
Actually, I was going to say, what's a little bit scary to me is when you add what Elon's doing, because he's developing this robot. He's been working on it for 2 years now, and he's really getting pretty good at it. And then you add to that his million hours of AI training in every Tesla in the world, and then his almost complete mechanization of his factories. As he says to everybody, it's not the car's not the product, the factory is the product, and you roll all those together, and you're looking at the world where we actually become a bit useless in the whole game of things. Talking about AI.
Been saying to Howard he's useless for years.
My time has come.
Well, this is when we go all Roman and get the couches and just lie back and eat grapes, talking about AI, everybody, and how it's going to change the world.
You got it. You got it. All right. Well, it's 10 o'clock. Everything's running and people are here. I've admitted everybody to the Zoom that I can. So hey, let's do this.
Jan's eating strawberries. There you go.
Yeah. She's preparing to be a Roman someday.
Oh, apple.
Let's see. So I'm going to start with sharing my screen.
Oh, neat. Oh, very clever. Oh, I like it.
I thought you would. All right. So here is your challenge. This is like the side task to keep you mentally engaged during this presentation. In this presentation, there is an AI generated image, and your job is to try to find it. Tell me which image in here in this presentation was generated by an AI. So there you go. That's your task. I'm going to, there we go. All right. So yeah, aliens, why do they matter? Yeah, that's the topic for this morning. I've got 47 slides, so we'll just kind of roll right in.
Goody.
Oh yeah, I got heaps, and some of them are pretty quick and easy, like this title one here.
This isn't like one of those holiday things, is it? No, sorry.
You'll be purchasing a timeshare at the end of this. So here's where we're going, right? Start off with some aliens and UFOs in the Bible, people who have some, shall we say, non-new church ideas about aliens. And I'll talk about Lord of the Universe, kind of changing our perspective, and we'll show how Swedenborg changes his. Part 3 is Swedenborg and Howard Storm. We're looking at what Swedenborg says about aliens and what Howard Storm says about aliens in his near-death experience. And then we'll kind of wrap it up at the end with, well, okay, with all this in mind, why do aliens matter and what have we learned? So that's our plan for this morning. We're going to admit somebody. I'm going to admit Ian. All right. So, all right.
How many people have read Howard Storm? Put your hand up. No one? Okay, just me and Todd.
Yeah. Well, Jen's heard of it because I've told her about it, and so she may not recognize the name, but she knows.
This hit our group in, I think it was the mid 2000s. Yeah, we were talking about it in the ministers group in Australia. It might have been before your time, I think, Todd, but yeah, most of the Australian ministers have heard of him, I think.
He's pretty famous. So we'll start with aliens and UFOs in the Bible. I don't intend to spend a lot of time here, but I just wanted, this part is too rich that I could not do it, I shouldn't say. I want to take a look. There are people who think there are aliens in the Bible, and this is from Ezekiel chapter 1. As you can see, as I watched the 4 creatures, I saw something that looked like a wheel on the ground beside each of the 4-faced creatures. This is what the wheels looked like. They were identical wheels, sparkling like diamonds in the sun. It looked like they were wheels within wheels, like a gyroscope. So this is one artist's interpretation as to what that could look like. I've got some others here. Take a look. This is an older depiction of that scene. Not a great resolution image, but it was the best I could find of that. Here's another
created one.
Well, just hold your horses there. There's another one. So you got the 4 beasts, and yeah, there's that, and then here's another one. This is, it's not AI generated, unfortunately, but oh my gosh, I love this picture. This is the Ezekiel. He's looking at the wheels within wheels. You can see the eyes on the craft and the creatures. This is the story and the if you want to see aliens in the Bible, this is where they do it. Well, this is a book, Chariots of the Gods, pretty famous if you know anything about aliens.
Can I stop you for a second there? I was just thinking about all those pictures you showed us. They've got the wheels vertical, like on a cart, and yet that word gyroscope, and I'm not sure I'd love to know what the Hebrew is they've translated it from. Right. How do you get that word gyroscope out of the Hebrew in the Old Testament? But the gyroscope, of course, we know the wheel is actually horizontal. Well, there's a vertical wheel in the middle, but there's and none of these images that you've shown us actually have a horizontal wheel in them, which I think is quite interesting.
Yeah. You got a good point about the gyroscope. I don't know what the Hebrew, because I'm sure gyroscopes didn't exist at that point in time. But
Julian, you can fix us up on that, can't you? Sorry, Todd, keep going.
So this is a book, Chariots of the Gods, Eric von Daniken, and this is what he writes, or this is from the Wikipedia about the book. It says, the book suggests that the origins of many religions, including interpretations of the Old Testament of the Bible, are reactions to contact with an alien race. According to von Daniken, humans considered the technology of the aliens to be supernatural and the aliens themselves to be gods. Von Daniken asks if the oral and literal traditions of most religions contain references to visitors from stars and vehicles traveling through air and space. These, he says, should be interpreted as literal descriptions which have changed during the passage of time and become more obscure. I got to move your guys away from that. Examples include Ezekiel's vision of the angels and the wheels, which von Daniken interprets as a description of a spacecraft. The Ark of the Covenant, which is explained as a device intended for the communication with an alien race. Ooh, that's exciting. So yeah, it's that's one way people are well, they're seeing this as a aliens in the Bible kind of thing. And yeah, I don't know. I have a hard time actually buying it, but it's just trying to show you that there are people who take this quite seriously. Here's another book that a reader of von Daniken wrote this, and it says, after ufologists such as von Daniken had pointed out the possibility of interpreting Ezekiel's Merkabah vision as a report of an extraterrestrial spacecraft, Blumrich decided to disprove the hypothesis. So he's out to be the skeptic. However, a thorough examination convinced him that Ezekiel had in fact seen a spaceship. He then made detailed drawings of the alien craft. He decided the technology of the builders must have been somewhat higher than mankind's at the present, and he added, he had seldom felt as delighted, satisfied, and fascinated by being proven wrong. So there you go.
That's an understatement. He decided the technology of the builders must have been somewhat higher than mankind's.
Somewhat, not a whole lot, but just a little bit.
I read something recently. I don't remember who the author was, but they basically took the position that if aliens actually have the technology to get here and they have anything but a good motive, we're done.
Oh yeah, yeah. That is definitely one that's been around. Absolutely right. Yeah. It's
well, of course, one of the interesting things I find is with science fiction authors is that there's really only one author that looked at science fiction within the context of Christianity, and that is C.S. Lewis. And the interesting thing about C.S. Lewis's 3 science fiction books, or there's really only 2 of them are direct science fiction, is that they both look at aliens as being angelic beings. And simultaneously, they are also deeply concerned about mankind and about his future. I suppose the only alien movie that's come close to that is Contact. Where she goes, she's taken by this alien machine, which is sent to Earth, to this place where the alien creature, which doesn't actually exist in the picture, says, this is the way we've been doing it for thousands of generations with all of the peoples, all of the creatures that have reached a certain stage in their development. And that's about the closest you get when it comes to non-religious, non-Christian alien stories. So, yeah.
Yeah, true. Well, and if you take these kind of accounts and you apply them to the writings, though, the answer really is that it's angels, not aliens. That's going to be the Swedenborg answer. There's a guy, I don't know if you've ever seen it in the U.S., who does all sorts of, shall we say, far-reaching theories about aliens, and no matter what it is somebody encounters, it's always an alien. In his book, it's always an alien. And so I'd love to do a show with him someday and just say, look, it's angels in the Bible. It's not the aliens. But, we do get in Secrets of Heaven a reason as to why Swedenborg, even though he's not giving us aliens in Ezekiel, he does think that they're worth talking about. He says, in order that people who do not believe in the Lord or in heaven may be led to some recognition of these things, which is life after death, regeneration, angels, I have been given consent to mention the kinds of details that gratify and attract the curious. Those that are about to be stated concern planets in the universe. So, in other words, the Lord is saying, I want you to have some weird stuff in your books about other planets in the universe, because I know not everybody's going to be attracted into talk about life after death. I want to have aliens in the writings because not everybody's going to be interested in spirituality. So in order to lead them there, we're going to have this in there. And I just find that fascinating that usually in the general church we think, this alien stuff in Swedenborg is the stuff that vexes us because that's just too weird. We can't have that. Let's just kind of throw that off to the side. And here in Arcana, it's like, no, we need to have this to attract people in. So it's a very different take than I think.
So what you're saying is it's basically Swedenborg's attempt at clickbait.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Good one, Martin.
Exactly. But if you look around, now take this on, all right? Swedenborg was serious about aliens. If you think about it, all right, we find aliens. It's not a one-off passage. They're in the spiritual diary. They're in the Arcana. And he takes the Arcana stuff, he pulls it all out, makes a book about it to publish separately. I mean, this isn't just a throwaway topic where he just happened to say, oh, by the way, I was cruising through heaven and I ran across this spirit from the moon. He spends a lot of time with it. And think about it like this. There's more direct teachings on aliens than women in the priesthood, the degrees of the priesthood, or homosexuality. I mean, these are the topics that we talk about, and yet we have more written about aliens than any of it. I can't begin to think how many years the General Church Cyber Councils talked about the degrees of the priesthood and how important it is, and blah, blah, blah. Man, it's not even talked in the writings. It's not even there,
I'm with you on that, Todd. Definitely with you on that.
Come on.
And Todd, with a title like Cyber Council, shouldn't they be talking about aliens?
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So all right, let's take this to the next step further. My theory that I'm going to work with is, was Swedenborg abducted by aliens? Listen, this is what he writes. This is his words, not the AI chatbot words. He says, once on waking from sleep, I fell into a profound meditation about God. And when I looked up, I saw in the sky above me a brilliant oval-shaped light. When I fixed my gaze upon that light, it moved to either side and occupied the surrounding area. Right? That's how they describe being abducted. They look up and they see a bright light. Then behold, heaven opened up to me. I saw magnificent things and angels standing in a circle on the south side of the opening, talking to each other. Now, if you're Von Daniken, it's aliens standing in a circle talking to each other, right?
Yeah.
Right? You know,
yep.
Swedenborg has been abducted by aliens and he sees it all. It's very clear. And this is important. This is important because this abduction scenario changes a little bit about how he sees God of the universe. Mm-hmm. All right. This is, I'm being silly, but it also, there's a real point to why I give you that. Because look at this. All right. This is January 23rd, 1748. Swedenborg is using the term God Messiah in the early spiritual experiences. All right. So for, the first couple of years of his kind of spiritual sight, he refers to the Lord as God Messiah. Starting January 6th, 1748, he stops using God Messiah and starts saying Lord. Now, I think that was in the background.
Your date is wrong there, Todd. You've got 1948.
I know. Didn't you hear me? What? I corrected myself on that.
So it was in the year of 1748, was it?
Correct. It was 3 days later.
Oh, okay. Was this when he had the vision of the food and stuff like that? Was that the same time, or was it another time?
That's another time.
Okay.
What I'm going to show you.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you're a gun jumper, Martin.
Yeah, I am. Sorry.
Got to build up the tension. So, what happened? What happened in those 3 days? No, it was not the Lord saying, you're eating too much. January 23rd, 1748. This is what happens. Swedenborg writes about Jovian spirits, so spirits from the planet Jupiter, who refer to the one and only Lord. Okay, so January 3rd, the Jupiter people say, Lord. Was he abducted? Well, maybe it's not such a crazy idea. Was he abducted by spirits from Jupiter? Here's a bit of the interaction as to what is said. What he writes. He says, it has also been permitted me to know the inhabitants of Jupiter because of my desire to know what kind of men live on other earths. For if there are earths, there are also rational and intellectual beings on them who refer all the things they see there to the glory of the Creator. There can be nothing in the universe which does not ultimately relate to the glory of God, and thus serve as the means to those who can perceive things heavenly and divine. The spirits of the inhabitants of Jupiter are of three kinds. Those who are the lowest or rational are black or dark, and they seek those by whom they may be led to the one only Lord, so they may become different, that is to say, heavenly. Besides this kind of spirits, there are others who shine in the face like the light from the candles, and they are also dark. They sit like idols and suffer themselves to be adored by the servants whom they had in the life of the body, for whom they say are the mediators to the one only Lord in heaven, and they are not willing for them to come thither except immediately through them. Those who are thus fiery as the face are called saints because they have persuaded themselves that they have lived a holy life in the body. Hence they shine in the face and are distinguished from the rest. The best of the Jovian spirits are their angels, who are clothed not in white, but in most beautiful blue, interwoven with sparks of gold. These are their angels and constitute the angelic heaven, and they say of them they are the mediation to the one and only Lord of the universe. So what I'm showing you here is before January 23rd, 1748, Swedenborg sees, I'm speculating here, he's seeing God Messiah. And maybe it's just kind of a God of this world. We know in ancient times, people saw God as a local God. This is the God of Canaan. This is the God of Egypt. This is the God of Babylon. He was a local entity. And Swedenborg, while perhaps broad-minded enough to see God of the world, do we have, because of this interaction with the Jupiter spirits, oh, he's not just God of this world, he's God of the universe. It's a stepping back and going, whoa, this is not the God that I thought I had. This is the Lord. This is the Lord. Now, I will say that's all my speculation. Swedenborg does not make that claim that, oh, now I saw Jupiter spirits, now I see it. But the fact is, January 23rd, 1748, he's always calling him God Messiah. January 26th, 1748, despite what the slide says, 1748. 3 days later, he now sees him as Lord. And the only thing that we have in between is this interaction with the spirits of Jupiter. So it's different. It's different. He's seeing something different. Now, this is what Swedenborg writes in Earth of the Universe about how he was able to see spirits. It says, I have been able to talk with spirits and angels, not only those in the vicinity of our earth, but also with those near other worlds. Since therefore I was desirous of knowing whether there were inhabited worlds and what their inhabitants were like, I was allowed by the Lord to talk and mix with spirits and angels from other worlds. With some, this lasted a day, others a week, and yet others for months. So it's, why did Swedenborg get allowed to talk to the people of Jupiter? Maybe just because he had that curiosity. So when you go back to that Arcana passage I showed you earlier about, well, why are aliens in the Bible or in the writings? Because Swedenborg was trying to attract the curious. So maybe this is maybe the aliens are in there as a reflection of himself. But when you start looking at it as God of the universe, as opposed to God of the world, I think there's a reasonable case to be made. The reason that they're in the writings is because the Lord wants us to see things from a different perspective. It's not just because he was curious. I mean, I think that helps, but I don't think that's the real reason. Let's look at this next from EU number 2. Think about what God Swedenborg is he trying to show us. He's trying to show us the God of the crucifixion or this grander Lord of the universe. It's a very well-known fact in the next life that there are many worlds inhabited by human beings, and there are spirits and angels who have come from them. Anyone there whose desire springs from a love of truth and the purpose it can serve is permitted to talk with spirits from other worlds so as to get proof of the multiplicity of worlds. He can thus learn that the human race does not come from only one world, but from countless worlds, and moreover, what these people's character is and how they live and what sort of religious worship they practice. If you just follow the highlighted words, anyone there is permitted to get proof. Anyone there is permitted to get proof. So this is the very beginning of Earth and the universe. They're like, look, you want proof? You're allowed to get it. If you don't believe me, you're allowed to get it. And to me, this is expanding our idea of God. It's getting off just the crucifix and saying that it's way bigger than that, guys. It's way bigger than that. So
Todd, it also expands what we think a human is.
hold that thought. We're going to come to that later. So I'll switch gears here and move to Swedenborg and Howard Storm. All right, Howard Storm, for those of you who are not familiar with him, had a very famous near-death experience. The gist of what makes him famous is that he was an atheist going into the experience. He dies, he wakes up, and he's still in his room, and these beings that are there keep calling him, say, come this way, Howard, this way. And they lead him down this, out of the room, down this long path. And finally, he says, I'm not going anywhere. They attack him. He's defeated by them and eventually decides, oh, I give up. And a voice comes and says, call God, ask for God. He goes through these machinations. Eventually he does. He calls God. God rescues him, and he goes to the light. That's a really interesting account. If you haven't heard it before, I encourage you to look it up. But so once Howard goes to the light, he has like kind of a mini Swedenborg experience of being kind of shown the universe, as it were. And so what I'm going to do here for the next few slides is I'm going to actually show you some clips from Swedenborg and compare it with what Howard Storm says, and basically showing you that, look, this whole idea of aliens and other worlds out there is not just strictly Swedenborg. That another spiritual seeker has found this as well. So here we go. This is from Earth and the Universe number 3. This is all very early. I have been told that anyone of sound intellect can deduce from many facts known to him that there are many worlds and people living on them. For it is reasonable to infer that such vast bodies as the planets, some of which are larger than the Earth, are not empty masses, created merely to circle the sun and shine their feeble light for the benefit of one world, but they must have some more important purpose than this, right? So Swedenborg is making a very simple argument that, hey, it's got to be reasonable to suppose the universe is full of life, right? It's rational when you look into the stars and you see all the stuff out there, that surely we're not the only ones out there. God didn't create all of this just for us. So it's not an unreasonable, but that's what he's trying to do, is appealing to the rational side. And Howard Storm says the following. He says, I asked them if there were other worlds, so the angels that were with them. And they said, yeah, the universe is full of other worlds. And there are other dimensions of other physical universes, and those are filled with other worlds. In our physical universe, there's unlimited number of worlds, inhabited worlds with intelligent beings. And then there are other dimensions with worlds in them, beyond counting, beyond number. So you see there's some similarities there of, there's all this stuff, it's got to be there. And the angels are saying a very similar message to Howard. God the revealer. What's he revealing? In Arcana, he says, the inhabitants of other worlds acknowledge the Lord as the one and only God, just like the divine showed himself in human form to Abraham, Joshua, Jacob, Gideon, Daniel, etc. He shows himself on other planets in a form that is recognized as a being human by them. Howard Storm. And that the action of God, the Word of God, the Son of God, Christ, the Spirit of Christ, nothing is apart from that Spirit. The Christ has been everywhere. Now, Jesus the carpenter wasn't Jesus the carpenter in every single one of these worlds. Ha, ha, ha. So basically, both Swedenborg and Storm are saying, yes, God reveals himself to people in a form that they can handle, a form they can recognize, a form they can be comfortable with, which, makes sense based on what Swedenborg writes about life after death. The Muslims wake up, and who do they encounter? They probably encounter a Muhammad or somebody playing that role. So we get given what we're comfortable with. And again, it's stretching our idea of God beyond just Jesus on a cross, right? Jesus the carpenter. There's more to it than that. The next one. So here's a good one. Are we more or less evolved than our alien brethren? So Mars, they said that God has revealed to them how they ought to live and what they ought to believe. Jupiter, they had seen the Lord Jesus Christ in the Son of the spiritual world, and that he was the same one that appeared on their own planet. When he comes to Earth, the Lord came to us and we killed him. So let's see. Of these options, which planet is the most evolved, or perhaps easier to pick out which is the least evolved? If you look from the Swedenborg perspective, I've actually had this discussion with our pastors as to, well, if you look at the Earth and the Universe series, are we further along or farther behind? Like, is the reason why we have so much evil in this world is because we've advanced the point to having it, and the Mars and the Jupiter people and other planets, they're more of, say, the Adam and Eve stage. They're just earlier in the process, and that's why God appears to them like in the garden. And so therefore they're less advanced than us. That's why we have the printing press. They don't. That's what Julian mentioned, was talking about yesterday. Well, Howard Storm sheds some light on this, because I have made the case that Mars and Jupiter and other planets, they're actually farther ahead. They're more New Jerusalem, not Adam and Eve. And Howard Storm says, here we go, we're less evolved because our world is in a lower level of spiritual evolution. In many of these worlds, Jesus didn't have to go and be crucified and die on a cross for their sins, because there are worlds where people have chosen good and rejected evil and lived a life profoundly in the love of God and the love of their neighbor. And so Jesus could go on these worlds and just bless them. And they were happily accepting Jesus. I mean, what a difference. Can you imagine a world where Jesus came and people said, yes, we knew and understand that this is what you wanted us to be, and we thank you for being our revelation. We have known you from the beginning of time, and we've understood you and tried to live the way that you have wanted us to live. It's a very different picture than what we experience on this planet. And so if you look at Earth and the universe, you'll find stories, and I think it is the Jupiter people that, when somebody is not living according to the rules, they get basically excommunicated and kicked out of the society. And so again, is that a more evolved or less evolved? Well, maybe it's just about where we are in the grand man. All right. People of Mars correlate with something that occupies a more inward position in a person. People of Jupiter, they relate to the imaginative of thought, and thus to an active state of the interior parts. Earth, we bear relation to the various functions of the exterior parts of the body. And the moon have relation to the ensiform or xiphoid cartilage to which the ribs in the front are joined. My point here is just looking at this, and we can say, yeah, we're less evolved because we're so barbaric and we fight and do stupid things. But maybe a part of that's because of where we relate in the grand man. We're typically described as like the skin and the hair of the body versus, say, Jupiter, imaginative of thought. Mars, it wasn't very specific, but an inward position. So there's something more going on there than just we're a bunch of barbarians. There's something about what we're related to. So what Howard has to say about this, Howard Storm that is, not Howard Thompson. He says, there are worlds where people are perfectly good and have no sin and don't allow evil to be part of their lives. This world is unique because of the degree not only of temptation, but the willingness to accept temptation and failing the testing that we're in. We're different because of the temptation, right? We're willingness to accept it. And there's something very real and raw about this world. It's very, sense oriented. And that's kind of our downfall. I think that's perhaps why this world is different. One of my pet theories about where are the aliens that Swedenborg describes, I tend to think that they live in a realm that we can't see. It's a higher frequency, different dimension. I'm not exactly sure, but they do exist. We just can't see them, which says to me that perhaps they're not as sense-oriented because they just don't live in this dimension, this space that's all about the physicality. And without that physical temptation, they're not as prone to give into it. There's something about it that's different. Speaking of different, what do these aliens look like? Let's take a look, see if on that. Mercury, they look pretty much like us. They're just smaller. Jupiter, they have very large faces and they move with the help of their hands, almost like swimmers. Some other planet was unnamed. This is their faces protruded, especially around the lips. And in addition to this, they were flexible. Speculation is that might have been Saturn, but Saturn wasn't on the solar map at that time, but it just says another planet. But here's the last one. This other one is, this one gets me, all right? He writes, some spirits said they never had been clothed with a body, nor do they appear to each other in a bodily form, but in the form of a cloud, barely having a human shape. Now, that's a spiritual experiences. It's not in relation to this Earth in the Universe sequence, but it still indicates spirits from a world beyond ours. So this is kind of like what Howard was saying, well, what is humanity here? So kind of, keep that on the back of your mind. Howard Storm, has a comment about what they look like as well. He says, when I asked to see what other intelligent beings look like, they paraded images of beings in front of me. They started off as humans and they got a little stranger looking and a little stranger looking. And they became unrecognizable as human beings and they looked very weird. And I said, okay, I get it. They can be shaped in very different ways than us. Fine, whatever. I get it. I get it. So they can look very different from us. But, we have this whole question about humanity, and what can these strange looking creatures, be? Are they actually human? Well, Swedenborg says the human being is not a human being by virtue of the shape of the face and the body, but by virtue of an understanding that sees what is true and a will that intends what is good. The material form which is added and superimposed in the world is not the human form per se, but is the product being added and superimposed to enable the person to perform useful services in the natural world. Martin, I'm so glad you were here for this presentation this morning.
I don't know. I might have got quite offended. You might have wished that I hadn't been here. I guess you know me well.
Well, I'll credit where credit is due. Howard and I were talking the other day, and he made some comment about Martin in a Martian, and so I'm like, oh yeah, got to do it, got to add that in.
Yeah, that's right. Was that a 1970s TV show?
Oh, you don't even know what this is. Looney Tunes, like Bugs Bunny had a character. Yeah. He was called Marvin the Martian.
Yeah, that's right.
And so yeah, Martin, couldn't be helped. So I want to get back to this idea about the abduction thing that I mentioned earlier, all tongue in cheek, of course, but still, go back to this idea. Once upon waking from a sleep, I fell into a profound meditation about God. And when I looked up, I saw in the sky above me a brilliant oval-shaped light. When I fixed my gaze upon that light, it moved to either side and it occupied the surrounding area. All right, then behold, heaven opened up to me. I saw magnificent beings and the angels standing in a circle to the south side, talking to each other. So, right, aliens or angels. Well, the question I have really isn't about whether it was Swedenborg being abducted. And this is David Moffat sent me this passage about, haha, maybe aliens. But to me, the fascinating thing is, well, what were these angels talking about, right? He's being raised up, and what's the conversation he's in? Well, maybe it was aliens. Maybe they were sitting around, because what it says is they were having a conversation about the only God. Who has conversation with the only God? Oh, it was the spirits of Jupiter, right? Right? About the only God, about being in a partnership with God, and about the salvation that results. Maybe Swedenborg was abducted by aliens, because when he wakes up, that's what it is. That's what we were showing earlier, right? In this thing, it's all about transitioning from God on the cross to God of the universe. There's something more. What happened? Well, that's what we said. We had the Jupiter spirits were calling him the one and only Lord, no longer God the Messiah. So I don't know. I initially threw this idea out there that Swedenborg was abducted as being just some funniness. But when I got into this whole thing about, well, he wakes up, it's about the one only God again. Well, I don't know. I was willing to hear it. I know it's crazy. That'll be my heresy. Howard has his, but this is one will be mine. Swedenborg was my aliens. I guess I'm never going to leave out of Sydney again, because no church will have me. So, oh well, maybe that's my plan. My plan is I will forestall being sent to Dawson Creek by claiming Swedenborg was abducted by aliens. So, all right.
I think your theory on clickbait actually means that you'll be very popular anywhere you go.
All right. So let's start, landing this plane. Why is it that aliens matter? What is the point of all this silliness? Take a look at this. All right. Think of the second day of creation. Until a person's regeneration starts, a person is not aware of even the existence of the internal man, let alone the identity of the internal man. Submerged in bodily and worldly concerns, he imagines there is no difference between the two. Furthermore, he is submerged in these same concerns. The things that belong to the internal man has made one through obscurity out of things that are distinct and separate. All right. So in this second day of creation, the deeper meaning is about being able to see that we have an internal and external. There's a higher and lower version of ourselves. We're supposed to regenerate, but it's not easy to do, because we're at the early parts, we're in the state of obscurity, right? We're in the state of obscurity. We can't see it. And so what I'm driving at here is that, well, aliens have this inner spirit too. There's something more about them, because, well, they are human. Each of us is inwardly a spirit. Anyone who thinks things through carefully can see that it's not the body that thinks, rather the soul, because the soul is spiritual. The human soul is our spirit, is in fact immortal in all respects. So I think what Swedenborg is doing here is, by throwing aliens out there, he's wanting us to see immortality and spirit. And he's put out these, they look different, they correspond to different parts of the body, but still what matters is their humanity, and their humanity is this inner part, right? There's something different about them. And it's kind of incumbent on us to kind of have an imagination. What is their life? What is it that they be dealing with? And if we can kind of stretch our imaginations as to what humanity is, it helps us to then reflect back onto this world and likewise pull ourselves away from judging just by externals, right? Oh, well, if aliens can live and feel and think differently than we do and still be human and God still loves them, well, what does that mean about the people on the island next door or the people across the state or across the train tracks, right? That kind of stuff. When we think about aliens, to me, we're forced to think about things other than externals. It's something else. It's something more is humanity. So what Howard Storm writes, he says, because in fact, what's important is our spiritual being and who we ultimately truly are. We are beings of light. We are beings of love. In a sense, this tent we live in is not who we truly are. In this body, it's more like a little pup or a prison that we're in. In our immortal bodies, we are glorious. We are glorious. So the question is, why do aliens matter? Well, I think that the teachings about aliens are essentially a tool to help us see past external differences and to look for our true shared humanity, both on this world and on this one too. That's the point to me of the aliens. Yes, Martin is absolutely right. It's full of clickbait. It's lots of fun and silliness. I do enjoy that aspect of it very much. But I think there is a real lesson there. It's this seeing the Lord as Lord of not just us, of the whole thing, whole universe and multidimensional universe and heavens and hells and all this. And seeing that all these things are other creatures are our brothers. And considering how much struggle we've had seeing creatures that are just like us on this very planet, we can't even see them as our brothers. This, I think, is really just one of those things where he's trying to stretch us and trying to teach us something more about humanity. So that is where I will stop talking. I will invite any other comments and any other lessons. Like, is there any other lesson that any of you pick up as saying, yeah, this is what I get from it? Oh, and then the other thing you have to answer is, which picture was the AI generated picture? Did anybody spot it?
I can only think it's the trees because they've been forced apart. So that's all I could come up with.
The trees?
So you took a silhouette of a forest and then forced the trees apart so that the flying saucer could come out of them. I love the expressions on those aliens' faces, by the way. That's great.
These ones?
Yeah, look at that. Look at that, guys.
He's
guy
deep
on
in
the
thought.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought
it even looks empathetic,
I thought the AI generated was the guy going like this with his shirt.
Oh, that one?
Yeah.
I thought it was the cartoony aliens.
Cartoony aliens. Oh, yeah, those guys.
Yeah.
But
you did say one slide.
Yeah. The answer is this one.
Huh.
So they're responsible for the typo?
Oh, very good.
It's this picture here is I typed in God sitting and looking at the universe. That was the phrase. So
it's very pretty. I love the colors in that one, actually. Really, really pretty.
I thought it looked like Zach sitting somewhere.
Playing a video game.
Yeah. Well, that's right. It could be a picture of the future. Are you worried?
Todd,
Yes,
Todd, where did you
heading.
go for that?
sorry,
Where did you go for that?
I forget.
Dally 2, probably.
Okay.
Oh, hi guys. We've got all these silent people who suddenly turned up. Hi, Ian.
Right.
Can I say one thing, and that is two things actually. One is the meaning of alien going beyond beings from other worlds. The meaning of alien generally is something which is not intrinsic to us. And that is aliens from other worlds, but it's also our internal and potentially heavenly life. So that is alien to us until it takes us up and makes it part of itself. So alien is a very good spiritual word. Okay.
That's why reminds me of the immigration. They use it all the time, don't they? Aliens.
That's right. Yeah. The other thing is when you put up the one that looked like Zach, you know, this is not just the Lord on the cross. This is the Lord of the universe.
Yep.
When I read A History of the Jews, the very first chapter talked about Abraham, and it said Abraham had this huge epiphany that God is not the God of that rock, but is the God everywhere. And that was the beginning of Judaism, you see?
The axial age. I've been reading about the axial age. It's when religion became everywhere. They call it portable, where religion was able to be imported to different places because it was no longer tied to the culture the of a single people's, a single nation.
And if you take that idea of the epiphany that God is everywhere, then you can spiritualize that in a personal way and say that God is not just the God of my Sunday morning, but the God of my whole life in total, you see.
Absolutely.
So there's a general application for the whole principle of what is alien and what is universal.
Yeah.
I had
Hi, Ross.
sorry, thank you, Julian. That actually sits very deeply about the universality, not only in a big way, but everywhere within. Yeah. But I had a more mundane comment about the humanity. I've heard somewhere that it was a big aha moment about inclusivity and of all humans. The scene in this early, I forget when it was, in the 1970s, 79 anyway, the bar scene in the first Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
Sitting there and there's all these people that look very different and you realize they're all human and they all have the same human concerns and whatever. And he's just sitting there having a conversation. I forget what the character's name is. That just
Han Solo.
Yes, Han Solo is just accepting all these people and he's friends with all of them. And that was like a wake-up call to a lot of people, like, oh, just because you look different, you have different values, you know, whatever, you're still one of us. Yeah, and I guess you've all, now some of you anyway have heard my heresy about everything everywhere in the universe is in human form. And I even take it to the extreme of minerals are even in the human form. And the human form, we are deluded by dealing with the humans that we meet on this planet. But that the human form, perhaps more interiorly, is a perfect organization of love, every kind of love that there could be. And in the divine human, every love is divine and perfect, an amazing human template that the rest of creation manifests in its own different way. And so to me, it wouldn't be surprising that one way to manifest a perfect template of love and use would be a cloud, because on your planet, you don't need this kind of manifestation that we live in. You just need a cloudy one anyway. So, but Todd, thank you so much. And I'm sorry I got here late, but I really appreciate your creativity and ingenious thinking.
Thanks for joining. Yes, late's fine, and you can always see the opening bit on YouTube.
Yep.
But, I think you got the important part. The opening was just about non-new church theories on aliens in the Bible. So you're right.
Hey, Todd, I don't want to puff you up any more than you already are, but I think you have a lot of validity with that transition and your transition heresy, and the use of it to expand people's thinking outside of themselves. I mean, that's the key to anybody's awakening spiritually, is to acknowledge that there are things, useful and important things outside of ourselves, and to expand that beyond the earth, because particularly in historically in Christianity, you have all those weird ideas about the whole world, the whole universe revolving around the earth. And that is, there's a real parallel there to the human tendency, at least the earthbound human tendency, to think the whole world revolves around us. And Swedenborg, going ahead and introducing this, says, no, we need to think not only outside of ourselves, we need to think outside of this earth. So yeah. You might be onto something.
Well, all right, and in all full disclosure here, the epiphany wasn't my own. This is actually something I was able to pick up from something that Dan Goodnow wrote years ago. He's the one who noticed this transition, and he didn't, I guess, flesh it out, but he noticed that at this point, this is where it changes. And so then we look at, go, well, what happened there? Oh, Jupiter. It's like, whoa. So I'd never noticed that change. I knew Swedenborg had used the earlier term and at some point changed, but I never noticed until doing this that it's like, actually, no, it changes after that meeting with Jupiter. So it's a speculation, but I think there's some reason to it.
Yeah.
Thanks for your great talk. In addition to Dan Goodnow, Christopher Hasler did an excellent presentation on this topic, and that transition that you touched on. Thinking about what you said this morning, it has come to me fairly strongly that I don't think Swedenborg could have written the Arcana Celestia without these interplanetary experiences. I don't think the Arcana Celestia could have been written without them. So, running along side by side, it was an epiphany, yes, and I think you did that brilliantly the way you presented it, but I still think, like all of us, he would be working that through as he was writing the Arcana. He didn't write Earth and the Universe or the interchapter material on Earth and the Universe all in one slab. It goes on and on and on. So I see a process of him, well, okay, I've got this, but my goodness me, I need to work it through and get it clear in my mind and clearer in my mind. But I go back to what I said, what your talk has done to me this morning is to bring me to the conclusion that the Arcana Celestia could never have been written without that epiphany. Thanks, Todd.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not confident of my remembrance here, but I believe that the Worlds in the Universe by Swedenborg was written quite early, or published quite early amongst his books. And one thing I've noticed, which is quite interesting, I think, is that when C.S. Lewis wrote his science fiction books, they were also one of the first, amongst the first books that he published. And I remember coming to that realization and thinking, there's definitely something about aliens or science fiction or even other worlds that appeals to us, and as you say, Ian, opens us up somehow to something else, something larger. Maybe it's like what you said, John, about Todd, about aliens and angels. Interesting that the word's so similar, isn't it?
Well, and just to add to what you're saying, Martin, Earths in the Universe was written in 1758. Same year as Heaven and Hell, New Jerusalem's Heaven Doctrine, Last Judgment, White Horse, and EU were all done 1758. So that's after Arcana's finished.
Okay.
Which makes sense. But he's still publishing for another 10, 15 years after that, because TCR is 1771.
Hang on a minute, Todd. Earth in the Universe is already in the Arcana. You pointed that out. So it didn't wait till 1758. He's writing Earth in the Universe as he's writing the Arcana.
Yeah, but Earth in the Universe is published as a separate book in 1758.
Thank you, yes.
But which volume of the Arcana does it start in? Don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of about midway through, if I recall correctly.
Okay. So I don't know. I wanted to hang back. So I actually have a real struggle with the idea that all Jesus is required to do on other worlds is just to visit them, and they are, as it were, ready for heaven, prepared for heaven. So that implies to me that there's no need of regeneration, no need of temptation combats, no need of any of the things that we undergo, that we need to undergo in this world to change us from unregenerate to people to regenerate angelic people ready for heaven. I have a problem with that idea. I'm cool with the idea, which I think Swedenborg stresses, that Jesus was born and died on this world, and I think that there are references in Worlds in the Universe where the aliens that Swedenborg talks to say that, yes, we know that and we acknowledge that. But to then say, they're somehow, you're basically saying that they never fell. They're still the celestial church.
No, I'm not saying that. I mean, that's the whole point about them being more evolved, because they've already gone through that process of falling and on their way back up. And if you start poking around, yes, I think Swedenborg's overall pretty rosy about the quality of alien life, but there are statements in there saying, oh, well, yeah, these guys, they get kicked off to the side because they don't participate. And I take it more like they're closer to the spiritual realm as far as their quality of life than we are. They're less prone to falling, which doesn't mean that they don't have temptations and stuff. Just like, children raised in heaven, they have to regenerate too, but they don't suffer themselves to be fools like we do. That's the difference.
Okay, I guess I tend to see the death and resurrection of Jesus as more of a cosmic event than a local event.
Well,
but
I don't know.
You've given me a lot to think about.
That's the idea.
One thing I think which is important to remember or understand is that, since the in the last half of the 20th century, when humanity started to send up probes and things to other worlds, and came to see that it seems to be a lifeless, the moon's lifeless, Mars is lifeless, and it seems to contradict what Swedenborg is saying. So a lot of people will founder just on that and won't look at anything else that's in his writings. But since then, I'd point out that the physicists have realized there must be this thing called dark matter, dark energy, and they don't know anything about it except that it must exist. Otherwise, all of their basic understanding of physics falls apart. So they're saying that there's a level of material physical universe which acts like it's spiritual, but it's physical. Otherwise, the galaxies would fly apart and everything. So it's we're in a situation now that we can entertain the possibility that there's whole civilizations on the moon or on Mars, but that we're just simply not able to see, because according to Swedenborg, we are the most outer, as to our consciousness, our lives, that we're on the most outermost level of all of creation, which is what we were just talking about, basically. And we're just not able to see it, it would seem, unlike maybe aliens who would be able to see it. It just opens up a whole new area of the unknown, which we thought, just a couple of decades back, we imagined that we had the real picture. Now we're thrown back into new possibilities, and therefore people now, when they see, Swedenborg said there's people on the moon and on Mars, etc., we can point that out and say, well, that needn't be an obstacle to you believing the rest of what Swedenborg says.
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. I think I've heard people fairly interestingly say Swedenborg had to name, and the only names he could use were the known names of the time, but it doesn't necessarily mean these are the planets he's talking about, you see. You can argue that one till the cows come home, but I think recently I came across a comment that the next, after the James Webb telescope showing the origins of the universe quite dramatically, the next one will probably be the Habitable Worlds Observatory. And I think that's where the whole space project is apparently moving, to look for what habitable worlds there are in similar size, similar distance, similar mineralogy and all the rest of it that could support life. And, I think that's going to be fascinating, but we're not going to be part of that discovery. Well, I'm not.
Well, 40 years of looking has turned up precisely nothing. So
that's what the government tells you.
Well, there's something called the Fermi paradox, which goes through all the reasons why we've come up with absolutely nothing. It's quite an interesting. It's way beyond any conspiracy theory. But anyway, sorry, Ian.
No. I just took an opportunity to have a quick look, and I noticed Swedenborg is talking in considerable detail about spirits from other planets in 1748. If you have a look at the spiritual diary, for example, from 1415, there's paragraph after paragraph.
Well, that's a lot longer. That's a long time before 1798.
That's the point, though.
Yeah.
You don't have to wait till halfway through the Arcana. He's already boots and all into the reality of aliens before he really gets cracking with the Arcana. It goes back as far as that, not just a sentence or two, but detailed information. Great to read, by the way, too. little bit more
Amazing.
tentative than what you get in Earth and the universe.
Thanks, Ian. Hey, Todd, thanks for that. I am headed out.
All right. See you later. Thanks for joining in.
Cheers.
Thanks, Howard.
Todd, I had a question if you have time.
Sure.
Sort of going back to Martin's comments about the incarnation of the divine on the planets. I definitely was aware of that teaching in probably Earth's in the universe about like we're the only planet where the divine actually had to come down in the flesh because we were so wayward. But it seemed it was implied in some of the quotes that you had that perhaps he had shown up on other planets, and also Storm's comment about Jesus the carpenter wouldn't have looked like Jesus the carpenter on the other planets. So have you given any thought to that possibility?
Oh yeah, I think if you read Earth and the Universe, there's no way that you can't. The Lord appears on other planets, very clear as day. That much is clear on. I don't think he goes to them in the same way he did here, but he does show up often as the Son. Sometimes he shows up as he speaks to them, kind of almost as if like as you would talk to an angel, like through a veil or whatever. But I think Earth and the Universe definitely gives us grounds to say the Lord shows up on other planets much.
Yes, so this number 7 of worlds in the universe, no one can properly worship God, let alone be joined to him, does not have some understandable concept of him, and that God can only be understood in a human form.
Yeah,
so that's a personal.
I'm going to go, Todd. Thanks for.
Bye, Julie.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.
yeah.
And I think you could do that, understand the divine in the human form without having an experience of that. That could just be an intellectual concept. And I think that many people on this planet have experiences of God similar to maybe what you're talking about, Todd, where they feel the divine presence, they see the sunset and they feel like that's the divine or whatever. Maybe, I don't know, but you're saying you think that there are actually like manifestations that look real, them on their planet in a way that maybe we don't have, but what we needed because of our very extreme sensuality was the divine to be on the planet like us, that could be crucified and die and resurrect.
Yeah, I mean, one of the planets it talks about, the Lord appears to them regularly because they don't have the written word, so he has to keep showing up to kind of correct their heresies, essentially. Like they play whisper down the lane and go, oh, well, our family parables go this way. And after a couple of generations, he has to come back and say, no, start again. I agree with that. Yeah. He plays that role. So to me, the Lord certainly appears to people on other planets. It's not that he doesn't appear there, but there is something different about how he had to be crucified here. I think that's the key piece. It's not about him physically being there.
Oh, right.
You have to go through all the temptations on this level, the outermost level, because that sort of encompasses all levels.
Thank you, everyone, for helping with that one.
I'm certainly comfortable with the idea that the human does not necessarily have to be a physical body. As he may or may not have appeared in these other worlds in a physical body, in a human form. And I'm comfortable with the idea that when we talk about the human, we could talk about the human in a body that's completely different to the way it appears in this world, notwithstanding that correspondences have certain role to play in that idea as well. Yeah.
Well, I tend to have more difficulty with that because the human form is supposed to be the perfect form for usefulness. And if God is that form, then it's hard to imagine how a being who's truly useful, truly human, can be different from that. So yeah, I'm interested to find out more about Howard Storm. I've certainly heard the name before, but really didn't know anything about him. But yeah, he's talk about beings, alien beings being quite different from human form. I think we can take that, or if we want to take it with a grain of salt. The other thing he says we can take with maybe a lot of salt is the idea that these aliens are perfect, that they're sinless. That seems to take away, to my mind, the possibility of free will. So it's, you know, that's just not possible, really.
Yeah, I like the idea that all organisms, all humanity must in some way be regenerated, definitely. Yeah. Must in some way be redeemed and regenerated.
Be able to be made in the not just the image of God, but the likeness of God as well.
Absolutely.
Which is what happens as a process when we regenerate.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good lesson. I think that's a good one to take away as part of seeing the humanity in others. That is part of the journey. We are the finite beings, all of us, no matter where we're born on whatever planet or dimension. There's still we still have a beginning, right? We all have a beginning that the Lord doesn't have. So I think that's fair to say there's going to be some process of trying to always chase and strive for being better than what we started out as. So
we have to be born in a physical world as well, if my understanding's correct. So that must be true for aliens as well as for the human beings.
Yeah. Well, it's 11:15. We've probably gone on long enough. We have our next.
Just one last point that I would like to make. There's a new theory on biology being promoted by a guy called Dr. Michael Levin, and it's called bioelectric systems. And what he's discovered is that our morpheus, the way that we appear, morphology, is not dependent on our genome. That up until now we thought that if you could only understand the genome, you could get hair color and eye color and all of these other things. He's actually now demonstrated that no, it actually lies beneath the genome's ability to dictate the human morphology, and it's actually dependent on what he calls bioelectric systems. And he's shown that using these systems that he can actually has the key to causing limbs to grow and all sorts of other things. Certainly at the moment, he's only done it in very primitive systems. Creatures, but he's pointing out that there is a level, a bioelectric level below the genes that can cause control, that can give you control over the way a body or an individual appears, which is a very radical, very revolutionary new. But he has all the evidence there. He's worth looking at his YouTube videos if you're interested in them.
What's his name? Sorry, what's his name?
Michael Levin, Levin. You can find him on YouTube. He does very extensive videos, PowerPoint presentations and stuff on his it's applied research.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks, Todd. That was great.
Yeah. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for everybody's participation.
Thanks,
Next
Todd.
up, 2 o'clock, Martin's on with What I Like About Heaven. So we'll see you all in a few hours.